Okay. So, Carolyn, could you please tell us your name, spell it, and where do you currently live?
Sure. I'm Carolyn Roseseed. It's Carolyn. And then the last name is Rose, like the flower, hyphen SEED, like you plant. And I'm in Durham, North Carolina.
Did you make up that name?
I did not. I was a rose and I fell for a seed. And my joke when we were dating was that if he didn't marry me, I was going to marry one of his brothers so that I could have that last name. I can't give that joke anymore at family functions because they're both married now. But yeah.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah. And so are your people Irish?
You know, we have been here so long, it's all muddled. I'm not sure. We have a little bit of everything in our history.
Mm-hmm. I think we're cousins.
Yeah. Do you have Rose in your family?
Yeah, I do. And they're Irish. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And they're from
maybe
your region. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, we're all connected, aren't we?
We are.
Fashion. Okay. So when you were a little girl, you know, I guess all little girls have something they want to be. Maybe they're told what they want to be, but when you were a little girl, what did you want to be? And how do you think that's translated into your life today and what you do?
So this question does crack me up because growing up, I grew up on a parcel of land that was adjacent to my grandfather's tobacco farm. And tobacco was his commodity crop, but he also had a humongous garden. And my maternal grandparents were also into agriculture. They had owned a grain hauling business and they had a humongous garden. So farm labor was not to be escaped as a kid. I was either shucking corn, picking beans, helping stomp on tobacco when it was time to put tobacco up. I did not want to be a farmer. When I was in high school, a lot of the kids in my community were members of FFA, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So it definitely was not something I ever envisioned myself doing as a kid. I definitely had lots of experience, however, as a kid.
But what was the reason you were so adverse to all of it?
Oh, I think picking beans in the heat. You know, it was just, I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. It was hot, sticky, muggy, and that didn't matter. You had to get out there and work anyway. I mean, most of our food came from the family gardens. So I think it was just the labor and not really wanting to spend my time that way. I envisioned myself doing something more with like veterinary care. And then as I got older, I loved to read. I was an avid reader and I ended up getting my degree in English. So all that said, as an adult, I very quickly got hooked on plants. And, you know, it just evolved from there.
That's pretty cool though. So it's full circle just on your terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Okay. So what is your dream job? If you could pick out any job to do, what would it be?
I honestly think I'm doing my dream job right now. When we first purchased our piece of land, I had in my head a vision of getting up and going to work every day and not leaving the property and doing something with horticulture here on the land. I had no training whatsoever in it. And it was just kind of it was just a dream, you know. There was no concrete steps that I had in mind to lead me towards it. But I love my job. I love what I do. I love that I get to continually learn new things. Like there's no end to what you can learn in this job. You're constantly faced with new challenges, new bugs, new pests, new plants. It's kind of a geek's dream job. There's always something to research.
Well, walk us through, you're talking about your job, but walk us through an average day in your job. And then I think we failed to ask you the name of your business or farm.
Sure. So the farm is MamaSprings, and that name originated because our farm is located on Mineral Springs Road. And I started the business whenever my third kid was a baby. And I was always getting interrupted and having to spring up and go do something else for, somebody in the family. So that's where MamaSprings came from. But an average day, I typically, get up, get the family going, the kids off to school during non-COVID times, on their Zooms during COVID times. And then once everybody's into a routine, I head out and I let the chickens out. And then I usually go to my solar shed and water things and shift things. I do a lot of microgreen production here, and that involves a ton of tray shifting and watering. Okay. And then I head to my high tunnel and I do watering out there as needed. And then after that, Monday through Wednesday are fairly heavily focused on what I call the production work. So soil prep, planting, weeding, pest patrol, that kind of thing. And then Thursday and Friday are very heavily focused on market prep. So, Thursday morning, Friday morning, I'm getting up and I'm harvesting pretty much all day. And it's much lighter workload in the winter. I do go to market year round, so I'm a year round farmer. But from, let's say, mid-April until frost, which for us is usually end of October, I have a lot of cut flowers that I harvest. So a lot of my Wednesday through Friday is flower harvesting first thing in the morning. That has to be done before we heat up. And then after the flower harvesting, I focus on the cut greens because, again, those need to be done before we get too hot.
And tell us more about where your farm is situated and how that works.
Sure. So I'm an urban farm. I'm just at the edge of the city-county line in Durham. I'm maybe 13 minutes from my farmer's market. I'm just really close to everything right here in town. And, I've been at this probably for about a decade now. And at first, I wasn't really clear on what I needed to do in order to generate profit. Now that I've been at it for the period of time that I'm at it, I know that I need to do quick rotation crops and I need to do high dollar crops like flowers. Yeah, did that cover it?
Oh yeah, that's really good. And I know when I talked to you before that you have a lot of passion around flowers. Maybe you could say something about that as far as your business and where do the flowers go once you pick them and things like that.
Oh, sure. So I really, when I started gardening, and I started gardening even before we bought this property, but my focus was on ornamental, flower beds, that kind of thing. When I started the business, I felt like I needed to focus more on food crops. And also I was trying to feed my family. I was trying to offset our grocery budget. I started dabbling in flowers. And once I started dabbling in cut flowers, just the joy that people get when they get the flowers, just seeing that on people's faces and how excited they get, that was a hook for me. I'll never forget the first time a woman came to my market stand and purchased a lot of flowers. And she told me she was purchasing them because it was for her mom's funeral.
Oh.
And her mom had been a flower farmer. There's been a few moments like that in my cut flower growing history that have just really cemented for me. There's like a soul food there, it's not, you're not eating the plants, but it's definitely feeding us.
Yeah. Art, that's the thing. Art has such great value.
And I feel like I've always been very interested in the arts. I was, as a college student, wrote a lot and was very interested in that. And I feel like I found my medium with flowers.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. you know, what's really cool is that during Victorian era, there were so much emphasis placed on the definition of what each flower represented and everything. And that really plays into what you're talking about too. So you would give a flower like a violet because it was represented requited love or something like that, you know, and people knew the meanings of the flowers, and it was just really powerful. If they
There's
didn't
a
like you, they might send a flower that had a really horrible meaning, and everybody would know that it wasn't a nice gift. It was, you know, a go to hell gift.
right. There's also like a nostalgia, I think, that flowers bring up for people. So I do, in the spring, I do a lot of lily of the valley. I have just a pretty amazing patch of this, you know, little teeny tiny flower that is kind of a pain in the butt to harvest, you know, because it's so small. But I can't tell you how many times people have come up and like picked up that little bouquet of flowers and inhaled it and said, this reminds me of my grandmother, or this reminds me of my mom. And there's just something really sweet about that.
Yeah, that's a nice story.
So what inspired you to seek a career in agriculture? What made you want to do what you're doing now?
It was really necessity. So I started the garden because, let me just back up a little bit. So right out of college, I started doing administrative work. And from that, I segued into being a computer programmer. For about 7 years of being a computer programmer, I was working part-time from home and raising our kids. So we had 2 daughters at that point. And then the program that I coded for my employer got outsourced. And I still had a 4-year-old at home. And the plan had been for me to grow a big garden to offset our grocery costs, and to then go back for probably part-time employment, doing administrative something whenever she went to kindergarten. Well, during that time period, during that little window of her being 4, the recession hit, and I got surprise pregnant with our 3rd kid. And we had this lovely stay-at-home but still working parent situation for our daughters, and we wanted that for our son too. So I started the garden so that we had food to eat. I mean, my husband's a school teacher, so we really needed to supplement that income somehow. Once I started the vegetable garden, I had such excess that all the parents that I knew that my kids played with, they were pretty encouraging and adamant that I start a little CSA program, which I did. And so that's how the business started, with just a very small CSA program, and it kind of snowballed from there. I was pregnant with my son and out on hands and knees harvesting, you know, like days before he was born. I couldn't squat because it gave me such heartburn. I was so big. So I had no choice but to be on all fours. And then, you know, within 2 weeks of him being born, I had him in a carrier and I was out harvesting green beans. And I just kind of made it fit around taking care of him. When he was 2, that's when I learned about a new farmers market opening up in Durham. Our main market here, it's very hard to get in unless you have a super niche product. So I knew, you know, as somebody just cutting their teeth, that I needed to probably look for other marketing streams. So when the new market opened up, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going for it. So from his age 2 on, I've been pretty full throttle at market farming and running the CSA in addition to that.
And you're on a small piece of ground though. How large is your growing area?
I have 1.5 acres that I own, and the garden is, at this point, the garden is at least 1/3 of an acre, which honestly is what I can manage as one woman without, I mean, I employ my daughters because they're teenagers now, but I don't have any other employees. So 1/3 of an acre, quick rotation crops, high value crops, year round. And that's what I can handle.
Okay.
That's impressive, a third of an acre.
Yes.
What a woman.
Well, thank you. I have slowly gone to planting into fabric, which has helped tremendously. I used to do predominantly cardboard and leaf mulch on top of that, and weeding that was a challenge.
Yeah. And what do you grow in your high tunnel?
So the high tunnel is typically filled with greens in the wintertime. I do dedicate a portion of it to ranunculus. That said, I think I'm about to take a break from ranunculus for a year or two because the voles have all found me. And it's just such a expensive flower for them to eat.
Yeah.
So, it's been roughly like a quarter of it has been planted in cut flowers, and then 3/4 are in greens. What I have found with my main customers is that in the winter months, I have real foodies who are there to buy food. They want to eat locally all winter long. And they might buy flowers occasionally, but our flower customers really show up from April on. When it starts getting warm, that's when our flower customers come out. And then interestingly enough, I feel like when school starts back is usually when that slows down.
Yeah. No more art allowed in life. Got to get serious.
I think people are just so busy, and coming to market on a Saturday morning and getting a cup of coffee and a pastry and buying some greens and flowers, totally doable in the more relaxed time of the year. But I think August, people just get, mid-August, they just get so slammed with just life.
So how did you get your property? How did that come about?
We actually bought this property when we were quite young. We were fresh out of college. My husband grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in the country. We wanted a compromise between the two. So, and we both were old house addicts. So we bought a 100-year-old house with 1.5 acres. And, I did have big dreams about elaborate gardens, but at that point, didn't really envision that I would ever actually have a full-time business from it.
Or pick beans.
Yeah, or pick beans, exactly.
Picking beans, how bad that was. Too hot. Yes, that's pretty good. Yeah.
I've learned now you get up early and you take a nap in the middle of the day.
All right, that's right.
So, are there any helpful tools that have helped you get started in the business or help you make a living? Are there any like tracking tools or things like that that you use?
Well, so when I was thinking about what tools had helped me, to be honest, my first answer was our public library. I think I checked out every Elliott Coleman book there was. I just read a whole lot. And then I joined CFSA, the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, and I attended conferences there. So I think that networking with other farms and attending workshops and reading, that was really crucial for me to get started. Just to see what could be done, and to realize I live in North Carolina. I can garden all year. I don't have to stop.
Yeah. Fantastic.
But are there other things you use now, like tracking sales and I don't know,
Sure.
growth of things, how well things do? Are there tools or systems you use for that?
So I used to use QuickBooks. I now run everything through Square, even my cash transactions, just so that I can, it's so handy to be at market and to feel like, gosh, it feels slow today. And to just be able to kind of go and run a little sales report super fast and see, am I up or am I down percentage wise? So when I first started, it was a lot more paper. I am a little bit of a dinosaur. in that I have a sales sheet that I handwrite every week, and it has my inventory. And I still do that just because I do love paper. I don't know what that's about. I think it's my age. But Square's pretty slick. Now that I am really using that, and I actually think COVID kind of forced that on me. I was more paper based before, and I just kind of kept these written notes and written tally sheets. And then come tax time, was like, gosh, why do I love paper so much? I have to input all this data now.
Yeah.
But with COVID, we wanted to stop using cash at the beginning because we didn't really understand how people were getting sick, and everything kind of went to credit card. And once that happened and I really started using Square a lot, I realized, oh my gosh, I have a really powerful tool in my pocket. I'll also say the advent of smartphones are amazing. I mean, I think back to my computer programming days and how I used to take my kids to the playground and then run back home to check a job because we didn't have smartphones then, and you might not understand what I say when I'm checking a job, but with coding, you might make a code change and then hit run, and it takes like an hour or two to run.
Yeah.
And so I was constantly tied to the desk. But with a smartphone, I can answer my customers' questions no matter where I am. If I'm out in the field, that's okay. I also take a ton of pictures to document what's in bloom when, what I'm harvesting when, and I go back and reference that at least weekly, sometimes daily, depending on what I'm trying to forecast. Yeah. So smartphone and QuickBooks.
Yeah. So do you have an app that you use to like track your garden, to lay that out every year, or are you just
Yes,
with paper?
it's still paper. It's still paper. Yeah, I actually have like a little template that I use every year, and I just photocopy it, and then I just pencil everything in. And I have paper calendars out in my shed too, so I note everything. So anything that gets seeded gets written on that notepad, and then I go back and I look. So in January of this year, I went back and looked, what was I doing last January? Okay, this is what I need to do. So I take a lot of notes.
No, that's good. That helps keep you on track.
So where did you want to be, or where do you want to be 5 years from now in terms of your personal life and your business?
So my son is 11. I definitely want to be farming this property until he graduates from high school. I do recognize, however, that the kind of farming that I do can wear your body out. It's very physical, very dependent on me being healthy. So ideally, in 5 years, I'm going to still be farming, but I'm also going to be pursuing an advanced degree so that I can transition to more of a teaching kind of role. Yeah.
What does that mean, a teaching kind of role? What does that look like?
I would love, so we have in Durham, we have something called the Hub Farm, and it's a public school facility. That's a working farm. I would love to transition to that kind of role where I'm working in some kind of educational facility, working with children and teaching them, how to grow things, how, where eggs come from, how to take care of chickens. I just see such a disconnect with so many of my kids' friends, just not really understanding proper nutrition, where their food comes from, what's seasonal. I mean, even with adults, I've had people come to my market and ask for pineapples before, and it just blows my mind. I'm like, they don't grow here.
Well, they could if you really create them. So what's the deal though, as far as your property? You wouldn't want to use your property in that way to transition that?
I envision by the time my husband and I hit like our mid 60s, we're probably going to want to sell this property, hopefully to a young farmer, simply because it's a lot to maintain, you know. I might have that timeline wrong. I might change my mind when I'm that age. I might decide I have a few more years in me. And I have the infrastructure in place now that as long as I'm here in this home, I plan to use it, even if that means bringing somebody on board to work alongside me. Yeah. So it's a little fuzzy. I don't have it all planned out yet, but I know next 8 years, I know what I'm doing.
Well, I think you've got a great start. A lot of people don't think about the transition into, as I age, how my body is going to support me to keep doing what I love. So well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 48. My body's been telling me for a while now that I'm not a spring chicken anymore.
Yeah. I think you're a rock star, Carolyn. I think you'll be our rock star. I really do. So it's very inspiring.
So when you're thinking about your particular part of the agriculture industry, what challenges have you faced along the way?
There have been multiple challenges, but I think the biggest one for me, and this was true even when I was a programmer, is because I work at home and because I have children, being taken seriously and not having people assume, oh, well, she's home all day, she can watch my child, or she's home all day, I can just pop in and chit chat. It's been, it's been a very good exercise in boundaries and learning that it's okay to say no to people. As a woman, especially I think as a Southerner, I've been raised kind of with the mindset of be hospitable and be pleasant and be nice. And I'm not saying I'm not any of those things now, but I have gotten very comfortable with telling people no. I feel like it's very common for farmers to be asked, give me a farm tour on demand.
Oh yeah.
Let me bring my kids by to play with your animals.
Yeah.
Well, why can't I come pick up, the product and hang out and chit chat with you for an hour? And that was definitely a problem for me in the beginning, just with having to learn, especially with my CSA at the very beginning, learning that on-farm pickup was problematic if I didn't have boundaries around it. It would eat an entire day up. For a little while, I transitioned to deliveries to avoid that problem. Since COVID, I have a great system in place now and I love it. I almost feel like COVID gave us permission to be a little bit more assertive about our boundaries.
So what's an example of what's changed since COVID? What have you done differently?
So at the very beginning of COVID, I actually, for probably the first 6 months, I set up a farm tent. I set my tent up in the driveway and I scheduled people to come pick up their orders. So I would send out a little Google form every week, have people and tell them what was available, have people give me their orders, and then harvest, get it all packed up and scheduled, hourly increments for people to come by. And I would just go out and put stuff in the cooler and I would wipe it down between each customer. So it was a very safe shopping environment for people. And now that we understand it's probably more of an airborne issue and I'm at my market dealing with people every weekend and that's all fine. And it's actually great. I love being back at market. I still offer the on-farm pickups because I've already got that established routine and protocol of, yeah, if you're my neighbor, you can totally come pick stuff up. I am not going to spend 2 hours chit-chatting with you, but you can come pick stuff up.
Very good.
That sounds good.
So any other challenges, not necessarily around COVID, but it could be any other challenges you've experienced?
At the very beginning, I feel like having the capital to get what I needed to do the job efficiently was a challenge. And learning while doing it, it was really a jumping into something that I didn't have training for. So it was learning on the job. And we were on a tight budget and I really did not want to go into debt to pursue this idea. I'm now more comfortable with, I know I can generate X amount of income, so it's okay for me to borrow a little bit to do what I have to do. But farming's expensive. I don't think people realize how much drip tape costs, or how much landscape fabric costs, or even Agribon to cover stuff, and it took me a while to accumulate that kind of stuff to make my job more efficient and less physically demanding.
Mhm. Lots of things to learn always, like you said at the beginning. That's the thing that keeps us engaged, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what advice would you give moms seeking to balance their work life? We see this often, Carrie and I hear about this, women feeling guilty because maybe they've chosen farming over, something else their child might be doing or whatever.
This is a tough one. And I'm not going to say that I got it all right, because I think it's different for different people. I never had childcare other than, the grandparents pitching in to help. Once my son was 3, he did go to a part-time, like half-day preschool program a few days a week. And I just would cram every bit of work into the time that he wasn't with me. But I essentially set up my property like a giant playpen. So my entire garden was fenced. I had tons of toys out there that I would rotate on a regular basis so that they didn't lose their novelty. And he grew up out there. I used to joke that it was the biggest playpen in Durham County. And I just, he would just go. I took him with me, and it was sometimes stressful, but it worked. I also tag teamed a lot with my husband. So when he would get home from work, then I would say, okay, you're in charge of dinner prep. I'm running outside to get a few things done. My recommendation to folks would be, if you can swing childcare and it's not too far from your farm, it's probably a good idea to have childcare if you're a market farmer on a Thursday and a Friday, just to give yourself that uninterrupted work time. Learn to say no. No, I can't keep your children. I know my child is here, but it's an extra amount of work for me to have your kid here too. So no, I'm not your free babysitter. Ask for help from your family. And really demonstrate, I think people have this thought in their heads when they think of flower farmers. I swear to God, it's like they think we're just like skipping through the fields, plucking one flower at a time in a gauzy skirt. So I think the biggest thing for me has been having my family here to help periodically so that they can really see, oh crap, she actually does a lot of work here. So that piece. And then the last thing I would say is, one of the really wonderful things about this is it has afforded me flexibility. And kids aren't kids forever. It's a short period of time, and there's a certain amount of just surrendering and giving yourself grace and knowing that you're not going to be, a badass when you are, but you're not going to like show up with all the product when your kids are teeny tiny. You just have to accept that they're teeny tiny and they demand a lot, and it's not always going to be that way. They're going to grow up and they're going to actually, start helping you at the farmer's market, or making bouquets with you, or washing your bins, or scrubbing your trays. My kids are totally my employees. They want money and I don't hand it out. I make them earn it.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, work ethic is important. That's for sure.
So, what's your go-to for self-care? That's our buzzword in these past few years. So what do you do to take care of yourself?
So honest answer, I really sucked at that for a lot of years. I've been in this game long enough that I have suffered the burnout and the crash, and I know that self-care is important. So what I tend to do is I have gotten pretty good about blocking out, Sunday morning. I'm not going to work Sunday morning. This is time that I spend relaxing in the hammock with my husband, or Saturday evenings. That is when we typically will watch a movie with the family and play board games. I also journal. Writing has always been a way for me to process my thoughts and feelings. And so that's something that I do on a regular basis. But mostly what I have learned to do, and it's been hard, but I have learned to really set boundaries and to protect some time when I'm not working. I think that's the biggest thing about this industry, right? Is that your farm can like run you in the ground if you let it. And there's always something to be done. There's always a fire to be put out. And sometimes you just have to be okay with something burning up a little bit in order to protect your relationships and with others and with yourself.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Okay, so what assistance do you know about for women who are in farming or agriculture?
That's a hard question for me. I think it's likely because there isn't a lot of assistance out there. The one thing I will say is I know for some grants, the rubrics that they put out do give preferential treatment to women. We're kind of grouped in with minorities in that way. Beyond that, I would say joining cooperatives if they're available. I know my market is predominantly women farmers, which I think is fairly unusual. I'm guessing it's fairly unusual, but there's a camaraderie and a cooperation amongst us. I really do feel like those women are some of my best friends. And when they do well, I do well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good philosophy too, because I think I believe that, really believe that. Yeah. We like to say that about men. If women are doing well, men are going to do really well. So,
yeah.
So, what role do you see women playing in agriculture now, and then how that translates to the future?
So I would say that women have always been involved in agriculture. They just haven't necessarily gotten credit for it. I think about my grandparents, and, for the longest time, I shied away from calling myself a farmer because I could kind of envision them in their graves rolling around and thinking she's not a commodity farmer, like one big cash crop. But my grandmother was just as much a farmer as my grandfather was. She was the one that grew all those vegetables that fed the entire family. I feel like women have always had that role and will continue to have that role. I also feel like a lot of our sustainable farms are now run by women. I feel like, and I don't know, I'm not an academic, so I don't know that this is true, but just based on my lived experience, it seems to me that the women farmers that I know tend to gravitate towards small, sustainable family farms.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's good for our environment, is good for our culture, and it feeds us.
Yeah.
I don't see that changing. I see, at least amongst the farmers that I know, the women farmers I know, they're killing it. They're feeding their families, they're feeding their community, they're being good to our environment.
One of the things that we know is that up until 2017, when the USDA did their census, women were not able to be counted on the census because there was one slot, and that was assumed it was for the man who would be the farmer or the manager. So even though we've been underserved, maybe we were underserved because we weren't recognized because we were doing the work. So yeah.
Yeah.
Point well taken.
So what can the government or industry or even our academic institutions do to inspire the next generation?
So as far as the government, I feel like if they continue to and even increase their investment in sustainable agriculture, that's going to do a lot for women farmers. Again, because that's who I see running these farms. As far as academic institutions, actually, telling folks, hey, women are in this, women have been in this, women are doing this. And making sure that's something that folks coming up through school understand. And then as far as industry in particular, again, I think it's about women supporting each other. It's about us knowing, hey, so-and-so is looking for XYZ crop. Let me connect you to, this is something that you do, and this is a connection I have. Let me connect you. And I really do see a lot of that in my community. We have a florist in town who specializes in locally grown flowers. And most of the farmers she's getting those flowers from, they're women, they're bringing that in, and it's just cool. She's a young mother, and she's working with all these other women, and it's just cool to see them coming in and bringing flowers for her.
That's lovely. So what's your favorite frugal marketing tip? Because we know women are frugal. We say sometimes actually cheap. We have to work too hard for our money. And so we're going to make sure we eke out everything we can from it.
I would say take advantage of Instagram. I feel like that's where all the farms are right now. And then of course, share it to your Facebook page as well. And be consistent. That's how you keep showing up in people's feeds. That's how you get the algorithm to throw you out so that your folks can see it. And then also to be real. Don't try to make yourself look polished and corporate unless you are polished and corporate, but most of us are not. And share your screw ups too. People appreciate that. What I have found amongst my customer base is that they want to support me. They feel connected to me, and I feel connected to them as well. So just capitalize on those relationships.
Yep, that's great.
Yep.
And so we kind of covered it, but do you have any other effective social media marketing tips?
So the one thing that I didn't say in all that is make sure you post photos of yourself and if you have employees, or if your kids are involved and you feel comfortable doing so, share those. People really like to see people in photos. I'm not really sure what that's about. It's just my observation that those posts get the most traction.
Okay.
Yeah. So what do you think success looks like?
Balance. I think that is crucial. You want to be able to pay your bills. You want to be able to enjoy your job. But that can't come at the expense of family time, downtime. So for me, success is being able to pay my bills, being able to be available for my kids and my spouse and my in-laws and my mom whenever they need me,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do.
So before we ask the last question, was there anything else you wanted to add? Any other things you wanted to share? Or are you ready to answer the last question?
I think I'm ready to answer the last one because I think that's the one. Well, you guys asked the last question.
Okay.
All right. So what is the best advice you ever received, Carolyn?
So I can't quote a particular person or get the quote right because I've seen this in multiple places, multiple podcasts. But I think the best piece of advice is don't let your farm run your life. Figure out what you want your life to look like and then fit your farm in around that. I know farmers who take the whole summer off and they just focus on the spring and fall, because in North Carolina, that's when event work happens. So if you're doing cut flowers, spring, fall, there's your money, take the summer off. I know farmers who take the winter off and they work spring, summer, fall. Make sure that you build some time in somewhere to get a break, because you're going to burn out otherwise. And I feel like I have seen that amongst my peers. And I feel like farming is an industry where we tend to glorify grit and scrappiness. And those are wonderful qualities. But your relationships are important and you have to have time for them.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very
that's
good.
great. Anything else you want to say before we wind up?
I would just encourage folks who are interested in farming to get their hands in the dirt and learn by doing. You're never going to be bored. Yeah. And I don't want to be doing anything else. I love what I'm doing.
That's a great thing. Well, thank you for such a great interview. You are